Hello once again, everyone. So another week, another video. I already mentioned it once, but I wanted to go over two useful but not necessarily great techniques. Now, what do I mean when I'm talking about that? Basically, these are techniques that if you're having to use them, something has probably gone wrong, and so I wouldn't necessarily encourage them, but at the same time, they are techniques that have saved my bacon and others' bacon more than a few times. So I wanted to put them to film and kind of get people's ideas on them. So the first one is probably the more useful of the two, which is the idea of the ponytail protect. Now, what is this really? Well, what it is back in kind of, earlier 20 teens, back when I was still getting new to competition, a common strategy was you would strike the opponent, and then to withdraw, you would turn and flee. Now, this doesn't really exist anymore thanks to penalties for turning the back of the head, which is a great thing, and I'm really glad that we added that. But that led to the development of this sort of position, where the hands are held above the head, the sword is basically flat between my shoulder blades, and it's protecting my entire back. Now, what does this actually do for you? Really all it does is it just puts steel between you and your opponent's sword, especially because if they just got hit, usually on an extremity, they would launch into a relatively simple follow-up cut that this could easily catch. Now, like I said, for the most part, people would hit, turn, and run away, and they don't really do that anymore, but that's because there's a penalty for exposing the back of your head. And generally, it's not a great idea, right? If I am fencing with someone and I strike them, it would be much better for me to retreat while covering myself with a better withdrawal. However, I could also totally see the situation in which you hit someone or miss or what have you, and you do choose to run away, essentially. I am sure that happened historically. Would it be particularly skilled? Would it be something I'd encourage? No, but probably happened. So, it's just a way to get steel between you and your opponent. Not the worst thing in the world. However, does this technique no longer happen? The answer is no. It does still appear. In fact, I even still use it from time to time. Where it really comes into its own now is when you accidentally blow past your opponent. Either they void, or they set your technique aside, or especially if I do an Unterhau that with wide footwork, I will often end up falling into this guard. So what do I mean by that? Well, if my opponent is ahead of me, and I come forward with a technique, and I don't hit them, but they've guarded in such a way that I have to go past them, ideally, I would be trying to step out to the side so I can face them again, but that is not always possible. Sometimes, due to, restricting factors, due to you've got other things going on, you're not able to do so. So as such, I come in with my technique, they make it so I can't hit them, we've ended up pretty much shield to shield. It's better for me to just keep going forward, then absolutely, I will fold up into the ponytail protect and just keep going for a couple paces, then turn around and face my opponent again. Because odds are they aren't going to be able to spin around and throw a cut at me, but it could still happen. If my back is already turned to them, I might as well guard. So that's one situation in which it does occasionally still come up. I have had it where I was fencing one of my guys, and I went for a technique, and I missed completely because he had stepped to the side, and I realized what was about to happen, so I did fold this onto my back and actually caught the cut. Now, was that necessarily skill? No, it was just a lot of luck, honestly. And as my mother actually says a lot of the time, it's better to be lucky than good. So, I'll take that advice. But either way, in that situation, I was already too far gone to do anything to protect myself, other than keep going forward. So folding up like that was my best option, as what kept me from getting hit. And that's not hawking my opponent, by the way. So we obviously, targets that are disallowed in general are going to be the back of the head, the spine, things that could really hurt someone if you hit them, even lightly. But in that case, he was sidestepping me, and I was going past him. My flank was his best target, so that's no fault of his. And sometimes people do walk past you and the best place to hit them is in the back. You can just be gentle about it. It's usually best to present a thrust or to follow them with a thrust because that will negate the cover that this gives you. Now the other situation in which I will use it is if I deliver an Unterhau while stepping outward. So this is one of my favorites to use. I will go down into basically iron gate. Sometimes I'll do it out of my long edge Alber. Either way, someone will come toward me. I'll take that tempo either by feinting high or just launching straight into it, and I will cut underneath, hitting them in the belly, and then I will fold up to protect myself, step out, and then back there. I'll also sometimes do it off of Unterswerks. So Unterswerk, hitting them, fold back to protect myself, and I'm out. And that one really doesn't end up so much as the ponytail protect as it just ends up with me covering. So that's pretty much the technique. Trick, really more than anything else. It is a desperate sort of situation, to say the least. And so if you are using it, something has either gone wrong or it's really more of just assurance, right? And especially with those Unterhaus and things like that, I should already be moving myself enough to the side, or even stepping forward, that I'm not worried about getting hit by your cut. I'm gonna keep going anyway. This is just ensuring that if you do swing around and cut at me, I've got steel between me and you. So, like I said, not a great technique, but a useful one. And as for why I call it the ponytail protect, by the way, is I had longer hair at the time, and so this just covers your ponytail. And one of the guys I initially trained with a lot had a long ponytail, and he did it a lot, so that's just where the name came from. Anyway, though, the other technique I want to talk about is the idea of voiding. And voiding can be a lot of different things, right? For example, that's a void if a cut's coming at me, that's a void, all kind of, even that is a void. Of course, moving your head is a void. But what I wanted to specifically talk about was the idea of relying on voids. And this doesn't come up as much with the longsword. It comes up a lot more when you are doing, for example, Dussack. And rather than actually practicing Dussack, I mean just playing with the Dussacks, as pretty much everybody in HEMA does. It comes up a lot with Dussack, can come up with Saber, and mostly one-handed weapons. And it's the idea of you have ended up in a position, usually a low position. The place I'm ending up doing it the most is usually when I have cut from this side and either missed or what have you, and my head is exposed and the sword is down in a relatively awkward place for me to launch a cut. The idea here now is leaning and or voiding with head movement. So what this looks like is if the cut comes in, the best option for me would be to fully retreat, but sometimes that option just isn't there. I had one a minute ago where someone got the back of my blade and popped it that way, so I was slightly pulled forward and the cut was coming up this way. I had no chance to step backwards, so I had to void. And it kind of gets into the sort of, matrix dodge looking, but generally what this void will end up looking like is leaning back. So it's very similar to doing a Volta Stable. You see this a lot more in, for example, Meyer's positioning, where the weight will shift from leg to leg. And it's a very useful skill to have. I lean forward on my attack. Here comes the defense. I lean backward to get myself some more distance, and then I can come forward with my attack again. And with a little bit of practice, it can save your bacon more than a few times, right? So in that instance, he took the back of my blade. Here came the cut. I leaned out of the way of it. It went by there. And I didn't get him back, but I didn't get hit. And absolutely, if someone was swinging a sharp sword, I'm going to move my head. Other situations can be it's just a quick head jerk. Sometimes you'll move down to the side. I have seen people attempt to duck with very limited success. But generally, just outright voiding is one of those things that I didn't really appreciate it until, recently. And that is because, in the past 2 years, I started learning how to box. And obviously, head movement is a lot more important than that. And I think it's a valuable skill that people should learn, but it is not something that you should rely on. Because if you're in that situation, you should be thinking about, I really shouldn't have gotten this close. I shouldn't have let myself end up in this spot, and rectify it on the next pass. I mean, if the head movement saves you, great. But don't get into the fallacy of going, well, if I end up with my sword low and I'm close, I'll just dodge. Because that one time you fail to dodge, it's gonna hurt. So that one is one that it has its place, without doubt, just like the ponytail protect. But and with a particularly skilled person, absolutely, you can get away with some crazy stuff. I've avoided by, centimeters, but I could have done something better, and I could have done something safer, and all it takes is one slip up with a sword, and it's over. So that's one of the reasons I categorize it as something that is useful, absolutely. Should be practiced? Yeah, here and there, but it should not be something you rely on. So, otherwise, bit of a strange video, I know, but I wanted to talk about it, and hopefully people can start recognizing it both in themselves and in others, because once you start to learn these behaviors, you can start to infer things, you can start to exploit things, and you can start to check more introspectively in your own training and say, hey, why do I do that thing? But otherwise, we'll talk about some other techniques, more useful ones perhaps, another time.